So buy-to-let mortgage in 2022. This is part two of a two-part series. If you missed part one, we'll put a link down below. Make sure you watch that. But you can watch that afterwards if you like. I mean, there's no real sort of order to this. But what we are doing in this video is answering your most burning questions to do with buy-to-let mortgage finance in 2022. So stay tuned. Hi, my name is Ranjan Bhattacharya. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell icon. We put out new videos each and every week, all dedicated to keeping you on top of your property investing game. Today, I'm joined again by Akhil Mair of Our Mortgage Broker. Akhil, how are you doing?
Very good, thanks.
So this is part two, as I said, catch up on part one, where we answered a whole bunch of your questions. But I now want to have a look at mortgage valuations. And of course, we've come out of the COVID-19 crisis and all of that, but has that had any change in the way that mortgage valuers are actually going about their craft?
There has been lots of changes that have occurred since COVID. You know, during COVID, there was a bit of a slowdown on valuations, a massive backlog. Valuations were coming in a bit short, a bit over. There was a bit of a mixed bag of news around the surveyors. But what I say is, following on from as we exit now COVID, a lot of the surveyors are actually doing a great job, we've found. Now, with regards to surveyors, now a lot of clients think it's actually the bank that value the properties. First and foremost, it's the bank that instructs the RIC surveyor to go out and then survey and value the property and report back to the lender. And what we have found is surveyors are extremely smart in the way that they review and survey the properties, and the RIC surveyors must follow the red book methods of valuing a property, and they've got their own means tested to do on all types of properties. So whether it is a single AST property, a HMO, as well as a commercial property. So there are different ways of valuing property. There can sometimes be a bit of ambiguity about prices and what the value should be, and whether you should get a commercial valuation or you should get a bricks and mortar valuation or a vacant value position. So there's lots of conversation to be had about ensuring that the surveyor is instructed to carry out the right valuation. And that's imperative that the broker on your side, on the applicant side, instructs the right valuation. And the best way of doing that is informing the lender of the exact valuation that is required. And more importantly, is choosing the right mortgage product to go alongside that valuation. There's no point choosing a AST or single AST mortgage product if you're applying for a HMO valuation. That won't work, and that won't work in sync.
So what's the difference between an HMO valuation and a regular valuation for something that's let out on a single AST?
Perfect. So a HMO valuation, for those that don't know, is a house of multiple occupancy, and that's usually of 3 or more unrelated tenants in one property. Now, every surveyor will go out and value a HMO on its own merit. Has it got en suites? Has it got its own bathrooms? How many kitchens? How many bathrooms? And the biggest tell sign is it within Article 4? Has it been applied for? Does it need planning? Has it been applied for? Has it been granted? Therefore, can I get a commercial valuation? And everyone wants a commercial valuation because they want a higher valuation based on the yield that the property occurs, because it is a 6-bed or a 7-bed HMO. The key there is to make sure that the property is dressed very, very well, that it looks like an HMO, it smells like a HMO, and more importantly, it can't be turned back into a family home. Because if it can be turned...
When you mean dressed, are you actually saying that if I just get some mustard cushions and a trendy feature wall above the bed and that sort of thing that people do, that is going to fool a valuer?
It won't fool a value, but what it will do, it will drum up good attention from the tenants, and every tenant wants a lovely property that they can live in. Now, what I would say is you need to do all the dressing because you have to make the property attractive. But more importantly, if you're looking for a HMO valuation and you want the right value, you've got to make sure the property looks and feels like a HMO. And what I mean by that is having individual locks on doors, having the right CCTV or the security.
But how does that affect the value?
Because what happens here is when you're valuing that type of property, it has to feel and warrant unrelated people living together under one roof, and it gives that property a standout valuation to the properties next door. Now, the key way to get a HMO valuation is applying for planning permission, because that virtually grants you a HMO valuation, a commercial valuation, compared to a single AST valued property. Now, the argument is, why should I pay over the odds or a commercial price for a HMO? Why can't I just buy it from next door? And the key here is to buy a property that is going to be entering into an Article 4 direction, or you do so by buying a property that you've applied for planning permission. So it's a bit of a tricky one, and everyone that goes into HMOs thinks that they can convert it into HMO and definitely get a commercial valuation. The key here is the number of rooms, the Article 4 direction, and how well it looks, and in terms of the property style and the styling of the property to get HMO valuation. And the key is how much have you spent on the property against how quickly can this be returned back to a family home. And if it's, as I said, if it's got all the nuts and bolts of a HMO, then it's very hard for the surveyor to argue that you cannot be provided with a HMO valuation. But the key is, I think, if you purchase a HMO property with 6 beds or more, you're virtually guaranteed to get a commercial valuation compared to up to 5 beds, because it's quite a hard contest to say it can't be converted to a family home.
I kind of agree with that. I think a lot of people are just, basically taking a couple of reception rooms downstairs, shoving a couple of beds in it, and expecting a higher valuation. There has to be some material conversion to HMO to justify that valuation. If it's just furniture,
furniture is not going to cut it.
In a lounge, that doesn't make it an HMO.
I agree, and I think
for valuation purposes,
you're 100% correct. And the other things you have to factor in is making sure that if you are going to put in dividers in rooms and so on, add pictures, take pictures of before and after. Have a good cost of a spreadsheet to show all the costs that you've applied, a schedule of works, all the contractors, all the invoices, because these can then back up your view on why the value should be X and not Y.
But this is still a bit of a minefield, because it happens all the time that people are getting HMOs valued, and they are thinking they're going for a sort of valuation based on the yield, but because the value that you come up with on a yield basis is so much higher than the property next door, which from the outside looks the same. Some valuers find it difficult to give it a value that's so over the top from an identical looking property next door.
Yeah, I do agree, but that goes back to ensuring that you're going to the right lender, choosing the right mortgage product, and ensuring that you have applied for planning or is in an Article 4 direction. Because if the property that you own, you're looking for HMO valuation, isn't an Article 4, the guy next door wants to buy next door, needs to apply for planning. So you have got an advantageous side from that perspective. But you are certainly right. How can you guarantee HMO valuation? You can't guarantee that, unfortunately. It's only tax and death which you can guarantee.
I think what we're saying is that if you are doing a mini HMO, it's highly likely that you're going to end up with a normal bricks and mortar valuation. It's when you've converted a larger building into more than 6 rooms because you've done it under planning permission, then it's more clear cut.
Correct.
We'll get back to the video in just a moment, but what I wanted to really tell you about was what is the most exciting opportunity in property right now, and that is repurposing defunct commercial buildings to residential use. Now, most people don't really know where to start, what to look for, and how to exploit these opportunities, and that's why I've prepared 90 minutes of free training for you to get you started on this wonderful journey. You can register for this free training at property-workshop.com. Join me on that free training, and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the video. So what happens if you don't agree with the surveyor? The valuation comes back and you're all excited. You think you're going to get 650, but the valuation comes back 600. What do you do then? What are your rights to appeal?
Well, the applicants have certainly got the right to appeal, and that's what we'll do on their behalf. The key here is that as brokers, we will actually go back to the underwriting and understand the reason why the surveyors put the comments that they have and they've undervalued it. So we'll understand that perspective. Then we'll feed that back to our applicants, our clients, to understand what their expectations were, what the valuers come back in at. Sometimes the client's happy with that valuation because it still meets the 75% that they're required to borrow. Because
isn't it true that, valuations, there's a margin of error plus minus 10% that the valuer can sort of differ. So you've got to come up with some rock solid evidence that if the margin of error is beyond that 10%, you've got to have some rock solid evidence to counteract that. If it's just a difference in value which is covered by that minus 10% margin of error, then you've got no grounds. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's certainly correct. And what the key here is to make sure you've done your due diligence, before you apply for planning, before you start knocking down walls and so on, you need to find out what the comparables look like in terms of demand for that type of property. If you're building a 7-bed HMO in a town that has no demand for it, it's probably not going to get a HMO valuation. So it's the demand for the type of property that you're creating to ensure that valuation, and also comparables that have sold and been bought in that local area. And usually it's 3 properties. So the likes of Connells and the alike will ask for 3 sold comparables for a like-for-like to evidence that your property is valued at the same price, and then we can contest the valuation. So it has been done. They have overturned the valuations, but they will certainly ask for up to 3 comparables like-for-like properties, and it has to be within a close vicinity.
And is that actually possible? I mean, in many areas, you'd struggle to get 3 commercial HMO valuations within half a mile radius.
Well, you know what? I would actually push back, and I would say that the person that's trying to convert their property into a HMO should have done that homework previously. Because the last thing you want to do is be the most expensive property on the street, because then there's no uplift value. So you've got to make sure that if you are going to convert this property to a HMO, you probably don't want to be the first on that street, because you need to have someone to go up against to make sure yours is in line with that or slightly better to enhance the value.
Yes, so I think it all boils down to how they were financed, because there may be HMOs in the street, but you don't know whether they've necessarily been done under a recent HMO mortgage.
Correct, and I think the average is 50%, or only 50% of the properties in the UK are mortgaged. So you've got to be fearful that, you've got to be conscious, have they got a mortgage or not?
Okay. Are there any differences to, an HMO mortgage is basically a commercial mortgage let me rephrase that. An HMO mortgage is the valuation is like a commercial mortgage because it's on a cash flow basis.
Correct.
So what are the differences between getting a valuation on an HMO property as opposed to getting on a valuation on a commercial property?
Okay.
Or mixed use property.
Right. So the HMO valuation is very much similar to a single family home valuation. Yes, it's done on a yield basis, but they'll always refer back to a residential basis. Commercial is a totally different ballgame. And the reason for that is because there are a lot of complexities around the description of the property, the type of property, the location, and most importantly, the covenant, the tenant within the commercial unit itself. Now, when the surveyor goes out and reports back to the lender on a commercial or a semi-commercial basis, they'll always report back on 3 valuations. One's a 90-day valuation. If the property was sold within 90 days, it usually gets you the X amount. Then there's 180 days, then there's an open market valuation as well. Sometimes they might give you a vacant possession value as well. Depending on what lender you go to, and this is the homework that we do as mortgage brokers, to ensure that we're going to the right lender that provides lending based on either a 90-day or 180-day, because that's where you're going to get the real value on the refinance or the purchase mortgage. If the lender's going to go on off the vacant possession value, then you might have a problem, because that means that they're not considering the rent or roll from the flats above or the retail unit. They're just going to give you the valuation based on the 4 walls, which can become very, very negative and detriment to the refinance or the purchase of the property. So you want to choose the right lender that is going to lend to you based on either a 90-day or 180-day value. But there is certainly it's a black and white divide in terms of how they are surveyed and how they are valued.
I think one of the big decisions people have to make when buying an investment property is whether to buy it in their own name or or a limited company. Are you finding people actually taking advice on that?
If they're not, I would certainly ask them to do so. I think it's detrimental on a tax basis, especially bearing in mind the Section 24 that was implied in 2016. So as independent brokers, we ensure that our clients have taken up the relevant advice. We can provide them, and we do provide them, with buy-to-lets in their personal name, a quote, as well as the limited company. There's lots of coverage at the moment around tax, whether you've got the NI increasing at the moment, is there corporation tax being increased going forward, and the alike. So it's key that you take the relevant advice. And what I mean by that is speaking to a property tax accountant to advise you whether buying in a limited company is advantageous to you as a taxpayer in today's world, or can you still afford to still buy it in your personal name. Now, there are lots of advantages buying in a limited company as well as buying in your personal name as well. But I think it is done on a case-by-case basis, depending on where you are sitting on a tax banding initially.
Absolutely correct. we've done loads of videos on this channel, and you can watch some of them here. They've received 70, 80,000 views. Some of them have really been popular indeed. But I must reiterate that all the advice we've given is general. And what it does is it gives you information so that you can ask the right questions of your advisors, so you get the specific advice that's tailored to you. You must, and you cannot take that sort of advice in the generality from YouTube, a magazine article, or forum on the website, or a Facebook page. You can't do that. That gives you the questions that you need to ask your advisors to find out how it specifically applies to you. And I see a lot of people that don't bother, quite frankly, and they don't bother, and then a couple of years' time they get it wrong. I mean, they're not so they get it wrong, they end up paying more tax than they should do.
Yeah, no, it is shocking. And when HMRC or your accountant sends you a bill and you're like, oh, I didn't expect that much. And it's a shame that people do that. And I think it's an education piece. And I think if you are serious about investing into property, you've got to take up the advice on day one rather than day two, because the last thing you're going to do is, fall foul of any tax laws and have a huge bill to pay in January or April, whenever they choose to pay it. I think, yes, take up the relevant advice. I think it's a changing horizon at the moment, especially around tax at the moment. If you are serious about property, you should take it very, very seriously. And the beauty about today's world is everything's accessible. Now, I know a lot of the things online are not, they've got their own agendas, but I think taking up advice from good experience channels, as well as firms in the advice, in the tax piece, is paramount. And please, have that strong power team. And I'm always, I'm an advocate of having a good power team around me. So it's all about having the right people to serve you well and provide you the right advice.
Now, I think one of the essentials to your power team is the Succeed in Property YouTube channel. So make sure, if you haven't already done so, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you kept informed of everything that's going on in the world of property. 10, 20 years ago, when people got into property investing, a lot of people didn't bother getting themselves educated, and there was an argument where you could just randomly walk your way in and figure it out as you go along. But these days, with buy-to-let, residential buy-to-let, there's tons of regulation, and you can easily fall foul of that. Commercial property and commercial conversions, development has a very high margin of error. And if you make mistakes, then that's catastrophic in terms of your profits. Are you finding people are understanding this now, and when they're coming into this industry, they're actually getting educated first?
I would certainly agree with the education piece. I think people are finding out that there's lots of rules and regulation that they need to abide by. And because it is a very grey and dark area to go down, they are conscious that they need to get the relevant advice. Now, there's lots of advice that they need to go worry about. One is the tax changes. Then you've got the regulation if you're converting it into a HMO. Then you've got other energy supplies, all the contractors, what PI cover is involved in that piece as well. So there's lots of self-education that everyone should be aware of. And the beauty of living in today's generation or today's times is there are good educators out there, as well as courses, as well as free advice out there for you to start you on your journey so you don't get burnt.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's essential these days to get properly educated. Like when you're doing residential property, they're tried and tested, proven formulas for success. Let's say you're setting up an HMO. Think of it like setting up a business. If you set up a brand new business yourself, you've got to design everything yourself and hope that you get it right. But if you were to set up a franchise business, you're cutting and pasting stuff that works and is proven, and you've got a greater chance of success, and you're going to achieve profitability far sooner. It's a very similar thing, I feel, with things like HMOs, commercial property investing. If you can start not from ground zero, but several steps ahead by cutting and pasting what's proven to work, then you are going to be ahead far faster, and you're going to achieve profitability and the results you want far faster.
No, I totally agree. And sometimes it might be a bit of a costly exercise on day one, but you'll be rewarded on the back end. So as you said, you can copy and paste, but it's about working smart, but more importantly, working around the right people. So I totally agree.
Absolutely. And of course, it's in property. We do a lot of education, particularly on commercial property. We're going to be launching some HMO courses very soon. So make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the bell icon, and we'll keep you informed of those moves. Akhil, thanks very much for joining us today. Akhil's details are also in the description below, and you can find out more about his services there. See you guys in the next video. High streets across the land are changing forever. Basically, there's an oversupply of retail premises. Shops are closing down, more are going to close down in the future. The government know this, and that's why they're introducing a light touch planning system which allows small developers to easily repurpose these buildings to residential use under a light touch planning regime called permitted development. Now, this is going to be the biggest revolution and the biggest change and the biggest opportunity for property investors that I've ever seen. And this is all coming into effect on 1st of August. So you need to know what's happening and what properties to look for to take advantage of these opportunities so that you can get in there and take that first mover advantage. I've got a 90-minute free masterclass to get you ready for August the 1st. Make sure you join me, click the link below. Whether you're a beginner or expert, we'll get you started.